Q&A here, so hopefully you've got some Q, and we'll give you the A. And our director of this film, not just this film, but the next movie, Cold Day in Hell, and the film tonight we're going to show, which is Shrieker Island. That's the t-shirt. And his name is Don Michael Paul. He's not only a director, he's an actor, writer, producer. He's been involved in many great franchises you're probably familiar with, like Jarhead, Sniper, Kindergarten Cop, Bulletproof, Lake Placid, Scorpion King, and many others. And those don't even include his acting credits, which so Don Michael Paul. And also we have editor for this film, if you want to come down also. I have the mic. Here's some questions. Tell us about this great movie.
I had a bet with my son who's sitting there. He said, man, because I brought 6 people. So I thought there'd be 6 of us. Sunday morning at 11 to see this. So I'm so happy to see so many Tremors lovers out there. I'm happy to hear, I heard a little one. Could have been more than 2. And so I'm happy that we got a young bird cover t-shirt cover. And let's hear it for Burt Gummer. It's one of the greatest experiences in my career to actually work with Mike Gross on this franchise. I do a lot of movies, a lot of sequels, and I've never met a more committed actor to a franchise, to a character, and I would sit there and just watch in awe of his performance. Because he, you know, when you're saying lines like Ass Blaster and Shrieker, and you know, why is Burt Gummer always the last to get the need to know information? And you're saying this kind of dialogue, and he is so committed to every single sentence. And every discussion I have with him is about how would Burt say this? Would Burt say this? Is this something Burt would do? And it was just a joy. We got to spend, I don't know, 9 or 10 months of our lives together doing that, because I did 3 of them. And it was just an incredible experience. And it's a testament to him that this franchise is still here 30 years later, because I don't think it would be without him. And it's a testament to you guys, the people who love this franchise, right? Because it's a very, very specific type of movie. It kind of lives in its own world, separate and away from all the other movies that this division. So I guess the first thing I just want to say is I wish he was here today. Sorry I missed him on Friday night. Unfortunately, I was finishing up another film. But, you know, this is a huge testament to him. And 200 years from now, when they write movie books, I hope they write movies about him.
Yeah.
And I don't know why he's not in a Marvel movie yet.
Oh, yes!
And he should be in one of those superhero movies, or the Expendables, right? Can't you just see him with Stallone?
Yeah.
That's one of the Expendables, being him and Jason Statham, Jet Li, and Stallone, and Dolph Lundgren. To me, he fits in that place, right? You know, I have a million questions for myself about this movie. The first movie I made in the franchise, and I never got to meet your brother, Brent, and S.S. Wilson or Ron Underwood. So I was never, I never got to meet him. I was given a script by Universal 1440. They said, we need to make this movie. We need to make it for a much smaller budget and go to Africa and do it. So I was kind of thrown in, you know, trial by fire. This is a huge learning curve for me, because as funny and as these movies are, they're super complicated to make. They're very difficult to make. And I've done a lot of, you know, blowing stuff up and gunfights and car smashing and flipping, and I do a lot of that stuff. And this is by far the hardest series of movies to make. It requires a lot of special effects, but you have to mix the horror and the comedy in just the right amount, which is difficult, and thank God Michael was able to walk that fine line. And it's just So this was a huge learning curve for me. I think we got better as the movies go on. I feel like I got better. So there's a lot of questions I have about why I did stuff on this one, this particular one. I won't bore you with all that. But I love making it, love the franchise, and I hope it continues to go for another 30 years so that people will be watching it. My son Jet has grown up on them. And he said to me, this is a true story, we sit down and opening credits come up and a few lines in, and I'm laughing because I'm watching it. It's ridiculous. He nudges me and leans over and says, I can't laugh. It's not a good look.
It's a great look. I disagree.
So forgive me for laughing at the movie, but
No.
I couldn't help but be charmed by it. But that's what my son said to me. So I think there's somebody else very important here because I spend a lot of time making these movies with her, and she's our Universal executive and producer. Cher Stallings is up there.
Hi.
And she had to put up with my craziness on all four of these movies, and many more, as a matter of fact,
Right.
that we did. And I love Cher, and we've had a great relationship, and I'm hoping that Cher and I can continue as long as they'll let me make movies.
Yeah.
My friend Vanek and I, we met 22 years ago now. He made a bad movie with Steven Seagal called Half Past Dead. I say it's a bad movie. I'm very proud of the movie, but Steven Seagal didn't really show up. And he was the star, which makes it hard when your star doesn't show up. So we were able to put the movie together and make it look like he was the star. And that's where our careers began together. And here we are, all these years later, still doing this. He was a huge part of this movie. You know, he's part of all three of them. He everything. And so we've had a great fondness for these movies. And I'm hoping they're going to keep going. I think they will eventually, and I think they deserve to.
Sure.
Anyway, what questions y'all have for me? What do you guys want to ask? Right here, what do you want to say? Oh man, that's a really good question. So why wasn't there any animatronic puppets in the movie, right? That's my question to myself. You want to know the honest? Should I be super honest? I'll be super honest. So we had a very small budget. And I was required to make this movie without animatronic puppets like the original and the first 3 or 4. And so that leaves you with visual effects, right? And visual effects are still expensive. And you can only do so much, you know, there's only so much that our budget will allow. So we created the graboid creature with visual effects, and we created the astronauts. We didn't have time to create, or money, to create a whole other creature in here. So the simple truth is we didn't have the money to bring more creatures. What we tried to do, I don't know if it was successful or not, maybe you guys can weigh in on that, is give the creature, the graboid, a new feature. And the new feature was, and I know because I've read, some people hate it, some people kind of dig it, was that the graboid, the grabbers that come out of the mouth, were able to leave the graboid, go out and hunt, and bring the stuff back. So that was a new kind of etymological feature that the graboid had, that we created for this particular movie. I don't know, how do you guys feel about that? Were you mixed? Did you like it? Did you hate it? What? You liked it? You know, I know that the purists, you know, the people who really, and again, I wish I could know your brother and the creators, because by the way, hats off to them. You know, S.S. Wilson and Brett Maddock and Ron, they created a franchise that's still around, was it 35 years in now?
33.
33? You know, it's hard to make one movie. Now, we're 7 movies into the TV series. And the fact that they created a franchise that is that enduring, I mean, it's right up there with Star Wars and some of the massive franchises. The fact that they did that is unbelievable. And, you know, I have the biggest respect for them. And I wish I could have got it when we picked the brains a little bit.
Next year.
So anyway, I have big respect for them. They deserve mounds of credit because that's a 1 in a 10 million thing. I mean, it's a 1 in a million thing to be able to direct this. It's a 1 in a 10 million or 20 million thing to create a franchise that endures like this one has. So those guys deserve a lot of credit, and I hope you guys were here on Friday to see them and pick their brains. So, yes, Sharon.
Yeah, I just want to chime in for Jamie. He's been texting me. He has a gig in Las Vegas this weekend, and I don't know if you guys heard it earlier. He would have loved to have been here, and like you say, he's like next year.
If Glenn or I have anything to do with it, next year.
He's like, if it's here next year, he'll try, but it just wasn't time enough for him to change his schedule.
Yeah. Jamie and Michael are so different. Michael is a very, Michael treats this like he's doing Shakespeare. And by the way, it is kind of Shakespeare in some strange way. But that's how he treats it. This is Macbeth to Michael on Broadway, right? He treats it very seriously. And does a lot of preparation and a lot of work. And he's very, very committed. And Jamie just kind of rolls in. It's like, okay, what are we doing? What? Okay, all right, yeah, all right, yeah, let's go. He doesn't say a line that's written. He doesn't. So I think it made for great chemistry, between the two of them. But Michael and Jamie have a totally different acting style. They don't prepare the same way. And so to get those two styles, mashing up against each other is it's quite a thing to watch. Because Michael is super prepared, and Jamie is just like flying on by the seat of his pants. So I think that kind of stylistic difference between them really made a nice energy and a nice relationship between them. So the beginnings of this movie, I don't know how much you guys know, but this script was written many years before we actually made it. I think probably right after Tremors 4.
Yes.
It was probably written somewhere in 2005 or 6. Yeah, and it was called The Gummer Down Under, or Tremors, The Thunder Down Under. There were several titles. It was much bigger than this particular movie. It was a massive movie. It was unshootable in terms of the budget that I was given. And for whatever reason, Universal decided that, to push a pause button on the franchise. So 11 years later, it kind of came back, and super thankful that it did. But it came back and so the script was written for Australia. It was much different, and it was unaffordable. So that's why we pivoted and went to South Africa and tried to make it a smaller version of what S.S. Wilson and Brent Maddock had written. But it was their screenplay, and it was also additionally written by a writer named John Welton, which I think wrote Tremors 4.
3. Tremors 3.
So they put different names on it. They wrote true stories.
Right.
But
excuse
me. I think they should be proud of this movie. There's a lot there to be proud of. My editor Vanek and I were pinching each other throughout the movie and saying, why did we do that? Why did we do this? What are we doing? God, did we really think we were doing something good there? But here, why don't you speak to that?
Well, the hardest challenge for us, I grew up on the original. I don't know, I was in my 20s when it came out, and I think Kevin Bacon said something like, when he first read the script, he thought, oh my God, I'm going to do a Worms Underground movie, it's going to kill my career, and it ended up being such a...
Speaking to the mic just a little bit more. Speaking to the mic a little bit more. There you go. No, it's okay.
So when it became a huge, it became one of the classic cult movies of all time. So for us, when we got on number 5, the challenge for us was we need to stay true to the original. One of the charms of the original was puppet monsters, and this was, when we did it, was 2014, and puppets in 2014, we weren't sure how audiences would react to that. And then in the end, the decision was made to do all the creatures CG. So we questioned that. Is it gonna be good in CG? Should we do it as puppets? In the end, I think our VFX company did a great job, making the monsters look scary. But the two things, one was that, and the second thing was the humor in the original, which I responded when I saw it the first time. And these were discussions we had in the editing room. How do we keep the humor going? How do we keep the scares going? And how do we stay true to the original? I hope we succeeded, because I know the fans love the franchise. It's a matter of reinventing it, but then staying true to the original, which is a very, very difficult challenge.
Questions?
You know, the original had two things this doesn't have.
That's okay. He's doing good. I know.
I
I'm
personally
enjoying it.
love
I get
watching
it.
Burt Gummer, but you know, everybody kind of clamors for that original feeling, right? Because it was such a specific original movie at the time, right? And Kevin Bacon and Fred Ward were that's just magic, right? That happens, and it makes movies hits, and it makes people stars, and you know, to try to recreate that is a very difficult thing to do. But they really are brilliant actors, the both of them, right? And unfortunately, we didn't have them in this movie. We had to you know, try to give it that same feeling, honor the original, respect the original, which we both do, but also to try to make a movie that would stand alone and succeed on its own. So, yeah. So when we went to work, after I got the job and we went into pre-production, we hired a visual effects artist. And we started to do some renderings, you know, some concept drawings and things with concept artists. And one of the things Universal really felt strongly about is they wanted to create something new with etymology of the future. You know, one of the great things that Brent Maddock and S.S. Wilson was each of the films had a new evolution. You know, the original was the graboid and the grabbers. Then they introduced the ass blaster. Then they introduced the shrieker. Then so they always evolved. So Universal wanted the same kind of evolution, and that's how we came up with the grabbers leaving the graboid, you know, to give it a different quality. So it all begins with graphic artists, and then from there they start to model the creature. And then from there, we figure out how we're going to get the creature into the film. And the other thing that we did, and you obviously noticed it, is this graboid just doesn't, because the first film, the graboid did a very specific thing. It travels on the ground, comes up, grabs things, pulls it back under, right? As you notice in this one, the graboid kind of augers to the ground, and it can corkscrew out like it corkscrew out of the ground and in its prey in different ways. So that was again another evolution of this particular graboid creature. But again, it started with graphic artists and the desire for Universal to have the creature evolve. Yeah.
To elaborate on my brother's question,
That's your brother.
yeah, that's my brother. This is my whole family here.
Nice.
Uh-huh.
You guys, just seriously, you sit down on like Sunday afternoon with 31 flavors and watch this movie? How'd that go?
Oh yeah, he's got a channel, and we a long time ago when Bloodlines came out, we did a review, or was it?
Did you kill us?
Yeah. No.
Did you trash us? Were you one of those guys that trashed me?
Absolutely not.
There's a lot of them out there.
We love Tremors. We love Bloodlines too. But I was just wondering if, since there's always something new, creature-wise, did Brent and S.S. Wilson, did they have an idea of a new concept for creatures, or when they wrote it for Australia? And was your graphics team inspired by that, and that's why you wrote it, or did they have a different idea, or did they have nothing to do with that?
I wish I could tell you that I know the answer to your question, but honestly, I don't.
I do.
Got to meet them. And,
I know the answer.
For whatever reason, and I don't really know, they stopped becoming part of the franchise. I just I knew I had to go away and make it, right? So I didn't get to talk to them. But within the script that I read, it was a great screenplay. I mean, I wish I could have shot that movie, but I would have needed $50 million to shoot that movie instead of the money that we had. So it had to be altered quite a bit just to fit it within our financial limitations. But the evolution had not really changed that much in the Thunder Down Under. But it was an amazing screenplay, and it was just like, whoa. And I thought, I got this job? And then I went in and I said, okay, so, yeah, we got $55 million, right? And they go, no, you have 3.8. Well, that could shoot the opening. So, but I wish I could say that I knew more about what was in their head, but I honestly, I didn't get a chance to.
I was wondering if you saw any of that you saw from the screen.
No. Anybody else? Yeah.
Can you make a Tremors video game?
I'll tell you, by the way, that is a great question. I'll tell you a funny story. So I was just in Mississippi shooting. We went to this roadhouse. What was that roadhouse called, Jeff?
Oh, the Tremors Roadhouse, right?
It's a little barbecue joint in Jackson, Mississippi. And you go in there, and it's all fanboys and fangirls, and it's one of these places where you go have a beer, you have a sandwich, and you play board games, and you play checkers and chess, and they have every board game you can ever imagine. And I sat down, and I'm leafing through the menu, and I stopped, and it's a pizza, and it said a Graboid pizza. I said, Graboid pizza, wow. Then I looked a little further, and they had a Shrieker's chicken sandwich.
I'd eat it.
So I called, just so you know, I have your husband's name, not as Michael Gross in my phone. His name in my phone is Burt. So when I call Michael Gross, it'll come up Burt Gummer on my phone. And when Michael calls me back, it says Burt Gummer. So I immediately went to my phone. I said to the waitress, I'm going to have the Shrieker's chicken sandwich, and I'm going to have the Growler. And I ordered them both, and I said, and you know what? I'm going to call Burt Gummer right now. And she goes, you know Burt Gummer? She called him Burt Gummer. Yeah, I know Burt Gummer. She goes, you know him. I'm calling him right now. I called him and he didn't answer. I said, Bert, I just ordered Graboid pizza and the Shrieker chicken sandwich in Jackson, Mississippi. He called me back 10 minutes later. He goes, oh my God, he was all excited. But that's to answer your question about the video game, they have a board game in Jackson, Mississippi that they created on their own in this roadhouse that's a Tremors board game.
Nice.
As far as a video game goes, I don't think they have a video game, and I don't know if there's plans for a video game, but that would be a great idea. Maybe you should talk to Cher.
Yeah.
With all the money to make it.
Like a video game?
There's a couple of browser games that you can play. There's Tremors, Tremers.
Oh, there's like 30 browser games you could play.
They're like little browser games. They're not full-blown video games, though.
But
You have
still.
a question?
So obviously, you're coming into this new, and I can tell that you clearly, if you would love to meet Ron and Steve and Brent, how hard is it coming onto a franchise like that and trying to, you already were speaking about it, the humor and the horror, maintaining the tone. What's that feel like even, just to take on something oh hey, here's the keys to Star Wars, like how does that feel to you to have done that, and hopefully for yourself feel like you lived up to it in some sense? So
Well, first of all, I was very honored to get this option. I remember when I interviewed for it. I had done one movie for Universal 1440. It was made for very little money. It was called Jarhead 2. And it's a war movie. And they really liked it. And so the head of the division at the time is a woman named Patty Jackson, who had been at Universal for many, many years, who's recently retired. She's Cher's good friend of mine. And she's also a Tremors lover. She is the one person who has shepherded this franchise for 30 years?
yeah, a lot, yeah.
Long, long time. So they saw this independent movie I made for them, and they really enjoyed it. And Patty Jackson called me, and I had never met her. I made it independently. They picked it up and released it in Google. And she called me in, and she's interviewing me. And she said to me, you know, we have this movie coming up, I want you to direct. I said, oh, that's great. I'm thinking it's going to be another war movie, because that's the Sniper franchise, the Jarhead franchise. That's really what I did. I did kind of movies about guys with guns and wars and a lot of things blowing up. And she goes, I want you to do Tremors. I'm not sure you know, I don't think I'm the director for that. She goes, no, you're the director for it. And I said, really? She goes, I really think you are. And I said, well, let me read the screenplay, and I'll tell you if I think I can do it. And so I read the screenplay, and I had a meeting with her a couple weeks later. And I said, you know, Patty, I think there's better directors for this franchise. I said, this isn't really my wheelhouse. It's not where I've worked. And she goes, you know, Don, I just want you to do it. I got a feeling about it. I want you. So I said, okay, I'm going to give you 1,000%. And that 1,000% on this turned into, I don't know, 6 or 7 years of my life doing 3 Tremors. So I guess I was the right guy for the job.
Was it worth it in the end? Yeah?
1,000,000%.
Yeah. Yeah.
I grew as a person, I grew as a director. I was super honored to try to be honored of the franchise, and my brother and S.S. Wilson created. Because, you know, you don't want to just throw it all out and try to reinvent it and say, I did this and look at how a superhero I am. You got to honor what they create and then try to create something that maybe adds to it a little bit, if you can, right? So that's what I try to do. Yes, Sharon?
Can you tell, there's a couple things that I find really interesting about this movie is the reshoot.
Oh, yeah.
To go out, you know, like, and try and describe the life cycle and the whole thing for people who hadn't seen a movie in 12 years or whatever. And the second thing is the big, you know, what was it, 5 days you shot in the water and everything, you decided to cut it out?
Yeah.
Those are kind of, I don't know if you guys know those things.
Yeah.
They're-
So we never saw it even on the DVD.
No. So, first of all, the opening of the movie where Burt Gummer is doing his survival show, that was never in the original screenplay. And after I finished the movie and we screened it, I said to Vanek and at Universal, I said, you know, there's going to be Tremor. There's going to be people who watch this movie that aren't Tremors fans that haven't watched all 4 other movies, and it's 11 years later. And I felt like we had to give them context as to who Burt Gummer was, what the creature was, and so the whole front of the movie where you hear Burt Gummer talking about being a survivalist and all of the stuff he's doing, and we go through the whole life cycle of the creature, was shot afterwards with my friend Vanek here, and on a 5D camera, and we got Michael to come out to the Angeles Crest National Forest at my friend Tom's house, and we shot all that stuff. And the end scene where he they're running through the house and the monster hunters, that wasn't Bert and Jamie, that was Vanek and I. So as you can tell, I don't really look like Burt Gummer. Vanek doesn't really look like Jamie Kennedy. That was us playing those parts at the end to create that whole bit. And we did that to kind of set the audience up of what this movie was, what the creature is, because it was 11 years after, and we wanted to open it up to a new generation of Tremors lovers who didn't know the first 4 movies. Try to give them a little bit of a jump start into the franchise. So that's why that was created. There was another sequence that Cher's speaking of, which was an underwater sequence. I was very fascinated with the notion of doing an underwater sequence with a Tremors movie, because everything in Tremors is very hot and dry and dusty and dirty. So I wanted to do an underwater sequence. And we shot this whole underwater sequence, and it just, as we're getting down to the end and we're trying to wrap this movie up and we're trying to figure out how do we make this, you know, so it go, because, you know, all these movies are a bit breezy. You know, they go by quick, they're fun, you can watch them on a Sunday afternoon, you can go out to the kitchen, you can grab a soda or a whatever, come back 15 minutes later and you miss 15 minutes and you still kind of feel like you know what's happening, right? So this whole underwater sequence, which we spent 2 days shooting, feels like it slowed things down, and just I thought it didn't really advance the movie much. So we ended up cutting it out. The good news is, if you stay around for the next one, I got to do my water sequence with Cher. Yeah, and that was super fun to do. I really had a great time doing it, and we got to get the water sequence in, but we didn't do it in this one, in the whole day house. So, but I just feel like, you know, the Tremors creature is such a great creature. And if it can burrow itself underground, why can't it move through water? Right? It has that kind of whale. It's shaped like a whale. It has that kind of vibe to it, so I thought it would be an interesting idea. Yeah.
I don't know too much about the process, but I kind of see that curriculum, but in terms of like.
You know what the process to produce a movie? You say, here's $3.5 million, go make a good movie.
Here's $3.5 million. Go make another one.
Well, I can say this, animatronic creatures, there's a serious art to that, right? And the guys that did the original are some of the best. But there's a whole side of that that is very complex in 2 ways. The first way is it's very expensive. Just to create these big, massive animatronic creatures is very expensive. And then everybody that puppets those creatures, and some of those big creatures are puppeted by 5 or 6 other people, they're all considered actors. So they'd all get paid like actors. So that's all super expensive to do. And it makes it cost prohibitive when you're doing a movie at this level. And it also takes a lot of time. You gotta bury the creature. You gotta do all these things to animate the creature and do all that. It's a very, very time consuming process. It takes a lot of manpower and a lot of time. So, visual effects, yes, they're cheaper and they're easier to accomplish. However, when you see the big movies that I know you all love to go see, the Marvel movies and all that, they have VFX units, 3 and 4 of them, right, that are shooting all the elements, all the plates. They shoot all the actors. They create avatars of all the actors. And they have many units that do all that. And then they have what they call animation. They've animated those scenes. And they can watch those scenes that have been animated in the computer and really just go shot by shot by shot by shot to create those scenes. On a budget like this, we don't have that. We don't have the previs animation. We don't have the VFX crew. We don't have so we have to do it all. So yes, it makes it easier and it's more affordable. But we have to do it in a way that is not like the big movies. We just have to do it all and get it all done. So and I'm not putting this movie down at all, but our visual effects I don't think are at the level of Marvel and those others because we don't have at our disposal the things that they have to do it perfectly, right? If we did, I think we could have made this movie much more spectacular. So the answer to your question is, it makes it easier for us to do, and it makes us able to achieve this type of movie on the budget that we have, and get it done. We would have never been able to make this movie with the animated animatronic creatures on this budget. We wouldn't have been able to. Yeah.
Oh.
I really think that was a great idea and you should stand by it.
Wow.
Really, that would make a great show.
It's your move. You guys look alike.
Yes.
You're such a handsome boy. How old are you? 13? Oh, wow. You think it'd be a fun show, Burt Gummer, the Survivalist?
Yes, it would.
As a what is it, reality show or as a
Mix.
Oh, like one of those ghost hunter shows or something like that. Share?
Share. Come on, share.
Well, you know what? I would be 100% open to that. You know, it was partially inspired by a couple of things. They wanted to have these segments in this movie called AVODs, I think they're called AVODs,
Yeah.
which are little YouTube videos that you can put online. It's just kind of tease the movie, right? And so we shot a bunch of these AVOD videos. They're out there somewhere.
Oh yeah.
With Burt Gummer creating
Burt Gummer's Bullseye brand pantyhose. Yeah.
Yeah, and Burt Gummer doing, and they're all on YouTube somewhere, so you can find them. And they're, I don't know, I think they're a minute or a minute and 30 seconds long. They're kind of funny and silly, but they were meant to kind of tease the movie so people will watch them on, you know, YouTube or whatever your generation watches stuff on. And you would then go, oh, this cool guy's cool, and then you'd go watch the movie. So that's how those were born. But I think you're right. I think there could easily be a kind of maybe a reality mixed with a scripted show
Yeah.
about Burt Gummer hunting
yeah.
monsters. I think that would be, you know, I love that
Oh,
line
yeah.
in the movie where Jamie Kennedy said, yeah, we got a gremlin in Fresno. He said. You know, Gremlins is a movie from my generation. You don't know about it, I don't know. Okay, yeah. But, so I think it's a good idea, yeah. You had a question?
Yes. Now, I know that trying to represent age progression and things in movies that you take a few weeks to film something that represents months or years in
Yeah.
time. So I know that movies aren't necessarily shot in sequence.
Yeah, no, they're not.
What's the biggest challenge in editing, production, whatever, to try to make the movie flow as smoothly as possible?
Man, that's such a great question.
Vanek.
Yep.
I knew the exact
To the editor.
I'm going to turn it over to Vanek, but I will say one thing about it. Yes, the movies are always shot out of order, right? Oh, here's a new thing I forgot to mention that I was pretty strongly adamant about. It was a big conflict at the beginning of the movie. I wanted to shave Burt Gummer's head. Because I don't know if you know Michael Gross in real life. Michael Gross, he looks like he should be teaching Algebra 2 at like Harvard or someplace. He's very professorial and he's a super intelligent guy. And by the way, he's completely anti-gun. He doesn't believe in guns. He's the exact opposite of Burt Gummer. And he has this, you know, he has hair still. And so we got to Africa and I went up to him and I said, Michael, we're going to shave your head. And so I called up Patty Jackson and I said, Patty, I'm going to shave Michael's head. She said, what? There was a huge discussion about shaving Michael's head. And Don's trying to ruin the franchise. What have we done? He wants to shave Burt Gummer's head. Long story short, we shaved his head. What'd you think of Burt with the shaved head?
Look good.
Yeah.
I liked it, right?
He didn't have hair anyway, so like, what does it matter?
Anyway, editing's a super difficult process. You get through the shooting of a movie, you think, oh God, you gotta take a deep breath. And then you get into the editing room and you go, oh my God. Now you gotta put it together, you gotta tell a story, and you gotta make it make sense. And it has to flow. And everything has to, you know, fit together just right. And it's a very difficult process, and Vanek is excellent at it. He's done lots and lots of movies and lots of television. So I'll let him talk about it with you.
Well, to answer your question, the process is what I read the script and I make notes on every single scene. What is the most important part of the scene? When they shoot it and the scenes come into the editing room out of order, I refer to those notes and I say, for example, the scene in the Jeep when Nandy and her daughter are driving and we reveal the egg in the basket. So I make a note. This is the important information in the scene. It's the egg is going to get paid off later. So if I get the later scene first, I always refer to my notes. Remember, the egg was the most important thing earlier, 10 scenes ago. So make a point of it in the end. So you try to, mentally that's how I connect it. After I put the first cut together, inevitably you go, oh, okay, now this doesn't play as well. Maybe we need to adjust how we reveal this information. Because editing, that's one of my favorite editors said, editing is the controlled release of information. You're releasing information to the audience. And you have to decide at this point, what information are we going to release? Are we going to reveal the egg, or are we going to wait for it? And as you put it together, it's always in your head. Once the first cut is together, we go back and look at it, then when he comes in, we make adjustments. Oh, like for example, maybe we released this information too early, or maybe we didn't release it enough. The audience needs to know more in order to understand the scene later. And that's when the re-edit process comes around, and we just go through it in a filtering process until we, find the common factor.
I have two things to add to that, because it happened in this particular movie, We really, how when Jamie reveals to Bert that he's his son, that comes way late in the movie, right? I don't know, 3/4 of the way through, maybe more. That information came out within the filming much earlier, page 28, 29, we knew that. And I always thought this is way too early to give the audience that information, because then, the whole bit about, what I tried to turn into, Bert kept saying, what do you know about Florida? That whole kind of thread. So that's a piece of information that Danny's talking about, releasing it at a certain time, that we held on to because I thought it gave a mystery to it, and it made it more engaging for the audience to, what is this bit about Florida? What does he know? And then it's obviously revealed that it's his son. And by the way, shocking to see it with a group of people in a theater, because you guys all cheered at that moment, which I thought was interesting. I never thought of that as a cheering moment, but this particular audience cheered at it. So, and then the other thing, two things happened. The guy that's the helicopter pilot, the South African pilot, in that first scene with Burt Gummer, he's a real kind of crusty old South African guy. And, one day I was walking to the set and I looked under a tree and he's sitting in the way into the bushes. I said, what are you doing? He goes, just getting away from the sun. And he's in there and I'm thinking, there's gotta be a puff adder in there or something. What are you doing there? But he's just a crazy fun guy. And in the helicopter, he actually spit in his hand and offered it to Bert. Now, if you know Michael, would Michael ever take somebody's hand?
Yes.
Never, no.
Never, right?
Come on.
Wouldn't happen.
I know, Michael.
So the guy spit in his hand and said, and Michael, does that great look. But then later, that wasn't scripted. Then later, after he helps him, he brings him the jerry can. And I said, Michael, what would be really fun here is if you spit in your hand and you offer it to him and you should. None of that was scripted. That was all brought out by actors, right? And it paid off. You get the beginning moment, and then it pays off later when Michael does it and offers it to him and you should. So that's something that you don't plan on, that happens on the day. Another thing in this movie like that, the little wildebeest horn that is the bottle opener that has the guy's phone number on it? The prop master created that for me. I didn't ask him to. He gave it to me. He said, what do you think of this? I said, that's great. So I gave it to the guy playing Dan Bravers, right? Dan? And he pulled it out of his pocket at that point. He says, if you need me, you can reach me on the horn. He created that moment. That wasn't written. And then later on, it's reprised again, And then what we did in the next one, if you stay around to watch it, is that exact prop. It's hanging on the freezer in what's it?
Chang's.
It's hanging on the freezer door. We just do a quick shot of it as a little Easter egg. Just, put in there. Maybe somebody notices it, maybe somebody doesn't. So those are things that happen that you don't expect on the set. And somehow you try to make them a part of the tapestry of the whole movie. So editing is about, it's a little bit like putting a puzzle together, weaving a tapestry and trying to make it fun and engaging and dramatic and all these things. And Van exploded. So, anyway, any other questions? Or
Nope.
are we taking this out of the book?
Thank you!
Good job.